Hey everyone, welcome back to Basic Level Gaming. Today we're going to continue with our Learning to Play Chess series. I know last time I had talked about that we were going to work on openings, and we kind of are, but I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit here because I think this is a really important concept for us to talk about before we learn the openings, and that is controlling the board. Like, where do you want your pieces to be attacking for the most part? And we'll kind of go over activating pieces. We'll also go over the other thing that we've kind of not talked about at all is the ranks and files of the board, and we'll talk about those as well. So if you look at what I've got right here, we've got a couple of squares here. So the red square is the very center of the board, and you'll see right now the white has a pawn in the center, and then this little yellow square is like the next section out. And the importance here is controlling this red square, which means that if the opponent moves into a piece here in the red square, you can capture them, is ultimately what your goal is to control this. And what that means to as far as the game goes, this is going to be the spot where your pieces have the most flexibility. They're most likely going to be able to attack a piece. They're going to be able to attack more directions, and we'll show a couple more here as we go, just to kind of give you a background. Though that's kind of why you want to control this part here. This next section out is similar. It's just not quite as important. It's like the next step back. You want to control the red if you can. Otherwise, this yellow is good to control as well. And you'll see I've got this blue line here, or purple. I couldn't tell which one it is. I'm a little bit colorblind. But it's dividing the board in half. And ultimately what that is that's saying, so right now I'm playing black, so the part closest to me before that line, that is my territory. If I'm over here, it's kind of a defensive move that I'm making, like if I'm trying to control squares back here. If I am above the line, then I'm trying to control squares in white's territory, the opponent's territory. And that's ultimately going to mean you're in an attacking position. Now you can still make more defensive moves over there, like if you've got a piece that's being attacked, you can move a piece to be able to defend it. But it's still generally, if you're over here, you're attacking. So, that being said, right now, white they can attack. Well, actually, let's go back. Let's talk about the numbers here. So you'll see on the side of the board here, and not all boards have this, of course, but the one that I'm using here does show it. You've got 1 through 8. 1 is always going to be white's back row. And this is called, this back row, well, all of them, all these rows are called ranks. So, like 1, and the rook here, the rook is on the 1 rank. 2 is the 2 rank where the pawns line up. Then there's 3, 4, and so on. Then down here at the bottom, you've got A through H. And these are called files. So, like, for example, the rooks here are on the A file, or the H file on the other side. So, and the reason that's important is if you're looking at something and it says rook to A6, that would be saying that this rook is, well, or if this one's up here, but anyway, a rook is moving from somewhere to the A6 file. So if you look at A, or well, not A6 file, the A file and the 6th rank. So this right here, right above the pawn here, that's going to be the A6 space. So this pawn right here, what rank would that be on? And what file? Right now, it's been moved, so it's sitting on the E. So you'll see it's right here on the E file. And then it's on rank 4. So this would be E4 pawn. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, especially as we get further on when we start analyzing games and things like that. It's important because when you're looking at all the notes from the game, they're going to be in chess notation that's going to show what piece to what space, or if it captures, or if it's check or checkmate. And we'll talk more about all of that as far as notation when we get to that point. But I just wanted to kind of touch base on those ranks and files here. The next thing is when you're moving, especially in the beginning, which is called the opening, you're going to be looking to ultimately activate your pieces, which the purpose of activating your pieces is to give them room to move. So if we look at, let's look at this one right here. Right now, we've got the 2 pawns here for white are active, and they're in a good spot right now because you'll see they're controlling C5. Well, the one's controlling C5 and E5, which are in black territory. The other is controlling D5 and F5. So right now, you've already got 4 squares in black territory that if the opponent moved into, you can capture. So that's a great position to be in. And if you look at black's moves, on the other hand, they have made poor decisions on where to move. They've moved their pawns on the edge. That means they only control the pawn over here on A6 controls B5, which is still in their own territory, and H6 only controls G5, which is also still in their territory and not in that center that we wanted, or even in the yellow. It's all the way outside. So ultimately, this is your goal, is to get pieces that can move. Now you'll see I've got these X's here. These are spaces that your knight can move to. So the red X's are for the knight on G1, G1, and the blue X's are for the knight on B1. And the reason I wanted to talk about the knight is the knight has a lot of options. Almost always it's got places it can go, things it can do. It's very versatile. I wanted to talk about what you don't want to do with the knight. And that is, let's say you're going to move the knight from G1. This red X here on H3, you do not want to put your knight there. And the reason you don't want to put your knight there is the knight, because of its versatility, it likes to be in the center. If it is towards the center, it can control 8 squares on the board at a time. If it's on this edge, it only gets 4 squares. So like if it was in H3, the only places it could move would be G5, F4, F2, or G2, right back where it started. So it just doesn't have any flexibility in what it can do. It's really crippled there. On a similar note, let's talk about the knight over here on B1. You could say, I could take the knight and move it to D2. And if you did that, it's going to control C4 and help defend the pawn on E4. It seems like a good idea, right? You're protecting it. The problem is with that move is you're blocking your bishop right here, your dark squared bishop on c1, and basically you're making it an inactive piece, whereas right now it's active. It could get out there and it could attack, it could be involved in the game. So you don't want to block off your other pieces when you're trying to activate a piece. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to look at a couple other things here. Let's see, let's look at this one here. And this is going to talk about a couple of concepts on this one. So what's happened here, similar to the one I was just showing you, white had moved its pieces in here on the rank 4, so it had moved the pawns at d4 and e4. Black, the first time around, moved its pawn up here on a6, which was, we talked before, is not a good move. It realized that, and then it moved from e7 to e5, which normally seems like a good move. But because black already controlled the center, or because white already controlled the center, white was able to take that pawn, and now white is controlling 4 squares right up here in black territory. And that's amazing. Now they've just got a lot of control. Their bishops are both activated. Their queen has a nice straight line to work with. So it's really a good position. The one thing that I did just want to point out about that is this right here where you've got the 2 pawns stacked up together. It's called a double pawn. And the problem with it is it limits your ability to move a lot. So this back pawn can't move at all. It has to wait for the front pawn to get out of the way. And it also empties the D file, or the D file. And there's no pawns for white kind of protecting that file or being able to attack from that file. In this case, it was still certainly the right move to do. But you just want to be very cautious with doubling your pawns. You can get yourself in a really bad situation. And we'll talk a little bit further when we get into kind of the middle game stuff and the end game stuff about creating pawn chains where they protect each other, but they're also attacking other squares. And this ultimately interrupts that pawn chain, because that means on one side or the other, you're not connected to the other pawns. So just wanted to kind of point that out. Ultimately, still a great move, and it's going to happen. You're not going to be able to, nor want to, avoid it at all times. If you're capturing a piece and it puts you in a good attacking position, by all means do it. But just be aware of what you're doing when you do it. Another thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about activating pieces, and I'm going to go back to just an empty board, well, not empty, but just a starting board where white's made a move. You want to make moves that you're not going to have to just turn around and undo. So, and that's really most obvious when it comes to your more major pieces like the knight and the bishop and the queen. So if I'm trying to attack a piece and all white has to do is just, like, for example, let's say I brought, let's go this direction. Let's say I brought my, let's say this pawn wasn't here and I brought the pawn on d7 was already moved forward. And I brought my light squared bishop out to attack the queen, we'll just say. I mean, in this case, you wouldn't want to because you're not protecting it. But if you were and it was protected, all white has to do to get in the way is move the pawn on f2 down to f3. The only thing at that point that I'm going to be able to do to protect myself is pull my piece back. I can move it back one more, but then they just move the pawn from g2 down to g4, and then I'm attacked and I've got even less room to move. So you're wanting to position your pieces in the opening in a way that they're controlling squares on the board, but also you're not wasting time. You're not just gonna have to move and move and move and move and move, because while you're doing that, the opponent is opening their board up and developing their pieces, and it just puts you way behind. So you just want to be careful with that as well. Ultimately, that's what I wanted to cover today. So we will have our next video on Tuesday for the chess series, and we're going to start getting into more actively opening the game. Like, I'm going to show some actual openings, and then we're going to start working on getting to the point where we can play a game. And it's not going to be a perfect game. I'm going to play against just some random person, and we're just going to see how it goes. And then from there, we'll move into kind of analyzing that. And the reason is, I want to show you how to analyze a game, because you're going to have bad games to start. You're going to play poorly. You're going to make huge mistakes. You're going to forget everything you've been told about how to start playing, because it's just how it happens. You just get nervous. It's kind of an intense feeling playing the game, especially if you're really going back and forth with the other person, especially if you're similar skill levels. And hopefully you're wanting to do well, and I mean, I'm sure you are if you're watching my videos. You're wanting to learn the game. So you want to do it right. Just like anything in life, when you do it, you want to do right. And so when you start realizing you made a mistake or something, you get flustered. So I want to talk about how to analyze that, and that's one of the biggest ways you're going to improve. You're going to learn, and we're going to go through them, openings and end games and, concepts for playing the middle game. But ultimately, that's just information. And I believe the skill comes from playing and analyzing and playing and analyzing. It's just the right way to gain the ultimate skill. And a lot of that is confidence. Once you realize, you know what, I can do this. I can figure out what the best moves are, and I can recover from a mistake and things like that. That confidence goes a long ways in chess, just like it does in a lot of things, So we're going to work towards that. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up on where we're headed. Don't think we're just going to sit here and drone over and over and over again about these basic concepts. I just wanted to get some of these ideas down, because they actually will ultimately control how well you play the game at start, and how well you analyze your game. Because if you don't know the basic concepts, then what are you analyzing, So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on those notifications. If you have any ideas, concerns, feel like I said something wrong, something right, leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from everybody, and have a great day.